Morning.
Morning.
Morning. Hi, Carol. Hi, Ginny. I think we're pretty close to set. Luciana's just turning on the video or the recording mechanism as we are saying hi to everybody.
I confirm that we have just gone live.
Thank you very much. Great. Then good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to try and keep things as brief as possible. I recognise you are all you're under immense pressures at the moment. So thank you for joining us. I'm hoping that we can get through our meeting within an hour or shortly after an hour. We've got two key votes today. We need to vote on the approval or not of the schools block budget, and the maintained school representatives are going to be asked to vote on the de-delegated budget items, and we'll come to those as we go through them. So those are two key pieces of business for this morning. Hi, Brian. First of all, can I ask if we have any apologies? Luciana, have we got anybody who's apologised? I'm aware a few of you may have to dip in and dip out during the morning. That's not a problem.
No, I haven't received any apologies.
Okay, thank you. Then if I can move swiftly on to the minutes. We have two sets of minutes. The first set of minutes were the regular meeting on the 9th of December, on the Wednesday morning. Can I ask for anybody who has any factual corrections, which is what I'm looking for at the moment? And if not, having a quick whiz down, no hands up and nobody saying so, then I'll sign those as a factually correct record of our meeting on the 9th. We then had an extraordinary meeting on the 11th. The minutes are in your deck. A session dedicated to the high needs block. Can I ask if there are any factual corrections to those minutes? Again, I'm looking down the participant list. No hands up and no microphones off. So thank you. I'll sign both of the 9th and the 11th of December minutes as accurate records of those sessions. On the matters arising for the meeting on the 9th, if I can step through them, you'll note in your pack that we have had information from Piers Brunning. This was not from the December meeting, but from the October meeting where he made a presentation. I'm hoping that colleagues have found those to be a further helpful addition as we gather more and more information and data about the growth fund and how it is moving forward. Are there any questions on those additional pieces of information at this stage, or will they come up when Piers next presents to our meeting, which I have a feeling will be the first meeting in the summer? If not, again, I can't see any hands and microphones are all turned off. Thank you. Then if I could ask Lynn / Sal to thank Piers for providing that information for us. Appreciate that very much. It's there's certainly plenty of it, and I think we are getting to understand the background to where the numbers are coming from. Running further down on the matters arising, school admissions task and finish group. I'm conscious that, Sal, you have a lot on your plate at the moment, and whilst we need to understand and potentially move that forward given the pressures you have, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that we are really looking for establishing that task and finish group, getting it operated and having some feedback. Yeah, go on, Sal, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, just to let you know that the first meeting of that task and finish group is scheduled for next Tuesday. So, yeah, it is going to be up and running and getting moving. And as I said at the previous meeting, I can only apologise for the delay that's kind of been caused by the other pressures that we've had recently. But, yeah, we are moving forward with it.
Thank you very much. Brian will be really chuffed to hear that. That's good. I'm running through the rest of the minutes of the 9th. Are there any other matters arising that colleagues would like to raise? I can't see any hands. and microphones. Lynn, yes, hi Lynn.
Hi, I just wanted to pick up just on the insurance update, Paul, because I know that we had said that we were going to bring something back. It had been the intention to reconvene the task and finish group just before the Christmas break, but with developing situation, that just hasn't been possible. We have been progressing what we can internally, and I'm going to be in touch with the task and finish group later today to hopefully just to bring that work to its conclusion and be able to share something more widely with schools. So I just wanted to let everyone know that while we haven't been able to progress it at the speed we would like, progress is still being made, and we will have something out shortly, because I'm aware that it's normally at this time of year the non-de-delegated element of the insurance communication comes out to schools, so we want to make sure that we're still progressing that as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, we can perhaps touch on that when we talk about the de-delegated items in a few minutes, but thank you for that update. If there are no other matters arising from the minutes of the 9th, can I move on to the minutes of the 11th? And given this is a major project and programme for the whole high needs block team and all those associated with it, it's probably less about matters arising unless somebody has something very specific they'd like to raise, and more perhaps we ask when Sal gives us an update a little bit later if he can pick up the tone from that update session and move us forward. But if anybody does have a specific matter they'd like to ask now, please please ask away. I think I've got Emma, yes, you've got a.
Hi, sorry, I had my hand up earlier. I did actually attend the meeting, but I'm not on the list of attendees. So
I apologise, I didn't pick that up.
Okay.
Luciana, could we pick that up, please? Emma was indeed at the meeting, but isn't shown on our attendees list.
I'll amend the attendance list.
Thank you very much. So if there are no distinct matters arising from those minutes of that 11th of December meeting, can we move on then, please, to declarations of interest? So I'll just give a second for colleagues to share any declarations of interest. Emma, I think your hand's still up. If you could just drop that for me, please. Lovely, thank you. I've got no hands up, so I'm assuming there are no declarations of interest. Moving from declarations of interest onto item 33, contingency update. Catherine, can I pass across to you, I believe, please?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just share the report so everyone can see it at the same time. Right, so no big surprises. Schools Forum to note that there still haven't been any allocations from the contingency fund this financial year. And that's that.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to quickly raise the point you had? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I thought 2 or 3 meetings ago we agreed that the early years contingency was going to be integrated into the contingency update.
Yes, it was. It will be. Yeah, it's easier to kind of do towards the end of the year. So probably March we'll have more of an update then. So once we know the figures for the 3 terms, it's easy to then know what's come through the contingency side. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just thought, what with everything going on this year, there might have been some calls on the contingency or something like that this year. That's all. Yeah,
no, that doesn't seem to be anything as yet. I mean, the October census was obviously, we looked between last October and October 19 and October 20 and picked the highest figure because that's how we were getting funded. I think this term's still a bit up in the air about what's happening about the headcount day. So we're still waiting to have an update from the DFE.
So, Catherine, is it more accurate to describe the early years contingency more as a balance to recognise the distinct data and information that influences the awards that are given, whereas the contingency that we're taught, the main school's contingency here is for events that might have occurred during the year?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Ian, are you comfortable?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. There's, I mean, yes, strictly speaking, the early years contingency is around pupil numbers. Yes. So yeah, happy with that.
Okay. Then, Catherine, why not, if it is going to change, for want of a better word, only once a year, let's just have a single line on this contingency update that says early years contingency remains as is, to be updated in March or whatever. So we then fulfilled our commitment.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else on, any questions on contingency update? I'm not seeing any, right? No, thank you. If I can move on to item 34, revenue monitoring report. Catherine, we're back in your hands, I think.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So please, Schools Forum, if you could note the contents of this report. In-year deficit is now 2.76 million. Pressure obviously still in the high needs block. The cumulative deficit at the end of the year is now 6.12 million. This is a positive movement of 145,000 compared to what we reported in December. And I've listed there what that was about. So we forecasted new starters in January at Addington on a higher band than what they actually started at. Excuse me. And we had post-16 learners in colleges that were supposed to start in September and didn't. And that we had a leaver in one of our resource bases, and then that was offset by a slight increase in new top-ups in our academy mainstream schools. So that's it. So, and there's the tables that you're used to seeing. We've added the extra column that we wanted to from last time that was mentioned to put in the March forecast. So you can just see what we actually, compared to the budget, instead of comparing to the budget, we've compared to the March forecast, which was slightly different to the budget because we knew that we had balanced the figures for the independent special schools to make it balanced to 0.
Are there questions from colleagues? It's really tough, I appreciate, to read through a table on a call such as this. So I'm hoping colleagues can look at their own reports. I think you've still got your hand up, but is that a question for this report? Nope. Okay, thank you. Lynn, hi.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Just to add that, as Catherine says, we've added in the additional column. We've obviously talked at the last few meetings about the format of this report, particularly around the high needs block, where we've had a sort of balanced, almost a false balanced budget position at the start of the year. We've also talked about some of the activity data. So it's our intention that when we meet in March and we look at the budget consultation for the high needs block, we can set some of that format out more clearly with including the activity data, so that we will then be able to move into the new financial year with an even further amended format for this report. We didn't feel there was a huge amount of value in trying to go back and unpick the history on the activity for this year, but we will certainly commit to doing that going forward.
So without putting loads of work on your plate, but when we see the figures in that March-April period, we will have your estimate of soft activity that drives these numbers for the 21-22 period, and potentially an understanding of the soft figures that drove the 2021 figures. So we've got a comparison of activity.
Yeah, and it's something we can then monitor throughout the year, so that when there are changes in forecasts, we're not just talking about the pounds and pence, but it's more easy for everyone to see actually where those differences have been, whether it's been pupil numbers or average costs, etc., which will hopefully inform a better discussion around that going forward.
Thank you. I'm looking at, are there any other questions on the budget monitoring report? If not, thank you. If we can move on to item 35, which is the de-delegated budget. What I'd perhaps like is Catherine or Lynn, probably Catherine, forgive me, I'm guessing it's Catherine, just to quickly take us through the 5 cost areas upon which we are going to ask the Maintain primary and secondary school representatives to vote. If you could very quickly just describe each of those areas, and then we'll come back and take our vote. Yeah,
of course. So we've still got contingencies in there as as a service in the delegated. Obviously, there hasn't been a call on it, as we said earlier, this year. So it was 57,000 last year. So we've just rounded that down to 50,000, just so we keep it in there, because this is the only contingency that is available to schools to get their hands on, because everything else goes out from the schools block straight out to schools. So we just wanted to keep that in there. Behaviour support, obviously that's for primaries only, and that's the service commission from Foundry. We know that we're doing work with Foundry to set their budgets for the future, and we're doing a review, and it's underway at the moment. We had a meeting yesterday, and that's continuing. But we know that they spend more than they get in from the de-delegated to cover behaviour services. So we've inflated the cost, the charge slightly this year to hopefully will just tide us over until we can carry on with our review and have everything set in place for 22-23.
Okay.
EAL, that so it's obviously this is to pay for staff to help with EAL, and obviously costs are increasing for that, but we've because we don't want to add to pressures on the school budgets, we've actually put some towards that from the general fund, so that we haven't passed that all on to schools. And supply cover maternity always overspends every year, and it's doing the same thing again this year, so we have increased that to try to cover that off. But also knowing that schools have gone to academy this year, and a secondary is going as well at the beginning of the financial year, so we've reflected the increase to take into account. Licenses is the Capita licenses. We've kept at the same rates as last year, and that's just a fixed rate. And as we said, insurance, that we're not doing that as a de-delegated item this year.
Okay.
And that's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions, particularly from the maintained schools, but I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be from other schools too. Are there any questions around the categories or the rationale for the totals for those categories? I note that Catherine has left us, I wouldn't have done that, but Catherine has left us on a page shows that in this current year, the total de-delegated charges were 750,000, and for this coming year, they rise to 891,000.
Yeah, that's because we've taken out the schools that are converted to academy. So it was 1.3 at the start of last year for everyone that was a maintained school.
That's a useful and perhaps actually something for future it'd be worth noting. So the real increase isn't 750 to 891.
No.
Okay. It's just it's being spread across fewer schools.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Then if there are no questions on the individual categories, I'd like to move to asking the maintained school representatives, forgive me, only to vote upon each of these. I will go through each category and then ask the primary school representatives to vote first, and then the secondary school representative. Nick, it all falls on your hands for that. Carol, I'll just come back in a second, and then pull that all together at the end of it. So I need to ask for each individual cost item. Before I do, I can see Karina's got her hand up on Carol. Carol? Hi, Carol. I can see your hand up. I'm not hearing you, though.
Yep, sorry, microphone on. I would just like to understand what would happen if we voted against it. I don't understand what would happen in that situation.
So if you vote against, or if you don't approve one of these cost categories or some of these cost categories not to be within the de-delegated support, then effectively it is removed from the de-delegated support, and you will then have to find that service, I believe, from your own funding in your own way. I believe that. Lynn or Catherine, could you confirm that?
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, Catherine, I'm just going to say yes. I suppose it varies slightly depending on there, but yes. So where some of these services are obviously largely staffing based, You know, if the decision was not to support any of them as a dedelegated item, then we would need to take that away and look at whether that service still continued or not in that current format. For something round the licenses, licenses still need to be paid for schools to be able to operate them. So yeah, so we need to come back to you in a different way and I suppose pick up that conversation on an individual school basis. The costs for these won't disappear for any of them won't disappear in the short term. They're not something we can just turn the tap off. And we would certainly want to understand if the decision was taken not to support any of them. We would certainly want to do some work with schools to understand why that was, whether it was to do with the service itself, whether it was to do with the specific costs, etc. And we'd be really keen to understand why any weren't supported if that was to be the case.
Okay, thank you. Karina, Liz, I can see you've got your hand as well. Karina?
Yeah, can I just, clarify? So the charges have gone up this year. I can understand that because we've got schools that have academised. But I'm looking just personally at my own circumstances. So from a small school, we've gone up 2,400. If I was to add on the insurance costs, that would have been an increase of 9,000 in 1 year. Is that right, Lynn?
Catherine, you can maybe talk about the specifics, but yeah, because most of it's driven by, we've looked at the model in the last couple of years and we've moved on to a lot of them based on a per pupil basis, and obviously as schools have academised, there's less schools to spread it over, Karina, and that's the difficulty. What we've tried to do where we can is not pass on the whole cost of these services. So as Catherine mentioned, the support to underperforming and bilingual learners, we've not passed on the full cost because we recognise that would be completely cost prohibitive for schools. The same with the Foundry Behaviour Service. You know, we've tried to strike a balance, and that gives pressure back to Foundry and the council, for example, in how we manage that. But we recognise that it's an ever increasing difficult position because the less schools that there are less maintained schools that there are to buy into these services, the more tricky it is. And obviously, you know, losing another secondary school has in itself, you know, a big school moving out of the dedelegated arena, they tend to have a bigger impact than obviously, you know, one or two smaller schools going. So it is a really difficult situation, Karina, and I think that's something that we're really conscious of for 22-23. We're going to have to relook at all of these in the same way we have as insurance about actually what the longer term sustainable model for some of these services are. Given that the number of maintained schools are reducing all the time.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. I totally appreciate all that. I just think, you know, as maintained schools that are struggling and I'm facing a deficit every year, I need a bit more of a heads up about how many schools are academising that I'm facing increased costs every year, because at some point it's just not going to be possible. And I think you're right, we have to look at this model. Maybe we need a working group for 22-23, because I just don't see how this is possible going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, for me, this is absolutely. I mean, if this year hadn't been the way it was, we would probably have progressed some of these in a different discussion anyway. But we absolutely have to do that for 22-23, and you know, we would support any input that Forum wanted to provide on that in terms of looking at those individual areas.
Okay, thanks, Lynn.
Okay, thank you, Karina. Liz, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, most of the questions have been answered. It's about this is a bit too late in the day to say no, we don't want to support it. So it is about spending the time to look at next year's from now on and involving the schools ahead of that time decision so that they know the increase they're expecting. But also, do we have the information of who is actually taking up these services?
I certainly couldn't tell you that off the top of my head, but that's certainly one of the things that we're looking at. So, you know, we've obviously touched on the fact that we've kicked off the Foundry review, and as part of that, we're looking at activity, where demand comes from, how that develops the cost drivers, etc. That's something that we're working with Foundry on. So, absolutely, for all of those services, that's something we would want to look at, Liz, to really understand, you know, what the service is delivering, how that's being targeted, where the activity is coming from, what it looks like, and I suppose open up the conversation about what as a system we would want those services to deliver in future as part of the overall strategy.
Liz, is that does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it, you know, schools have got more informed choice if they know who's actually, you know, if they're receiving the choice. I think it's a case of, like most things, like most businesses, you want to buy a service that you're using, and you know, the de-delegated feels like it's a lot of schools have to use it, have to pay for it even if they're not using it.
Yeah, I suppose some of these initially would be on the basis that, you know, as a collective group, it provides for these services to be available as and when you need them. But obviously the academisation agenda and a reducing number of schools makes that, you know, changes that debate, I think, slightly, Liz. I think the principles of how some of this was set up initially, you know, I can understand we are sort of spreading the cost across everyone, so that as and when, you know, there might be some years that you draw on one service more than others, but, you know, as a collective group, it affords you the opportunity to have those services when you need. But I appreciate with the tightening of budgets and you know, the smaller group of schools that we have to fund it really is now the time that we need to rethink about that and look at how we move that forward for future.
Yeah, I think it needs to be in with like kind of the other traded services, and when you've got such a tight budget, you are constantly making decisions about what services you can afford to buy into. So I think it does need to be a bit more like the traded services.
Yeah, I think there's some tricky things in there. I absolutely think that's one area we need to look at, and one option. I suppose the difficulty with the traded services that if you know, particularly where these services are staff driven, to wait until there's a traded, I suppose, for whoever is selling that service, if you like, is the same as a de-delegated. You're not going to know until you know what schools buy in, how much income you're going to have to actually run that service. So I think there's a number of funding models we probably want to look at as a collective going forward about, you know, for each of those services, what is the most appropriate way of running and funding them going forward to make sure that we have something that delivers what we need, but also is financially sustainable in the longer term.
I'd like to raise 2 points, and Karini, I think I'm going to come back to you. It looks like your hand is still up. We've got licenses and subscriptions, which is not a service per se. That's a reallocation of an expected cost. One would anticipate that as schools move, as schools move from maintain to academisation, the borough's total cost for that will reduce in almost exactly the same proportion.
Yeah, so some of that is around what point contracts are retendered as well, and what that costs are and what's tied into that. But we are doing some work around that contract just now. So again, that will inform the financial position for future financial years. So I think it's almost taking each of these individual items, Paul, and looking at the specific circumstances of them. You know, what costs are involved, how that contract's set, and how we work that, and then where there is still opportunity to relook at when schools have academised and they're either not using these services or they choose not to buy in. Do we understand why that is? Is there another opportunity to look at something in a different way? So I think almost taking them very individually to look at each of the individual circumstances of each of the headings would be a really helpful way of doing that.
Whilst I think that was a very good answer, it sounded to me like we are not seeing reductions in the amounts of money that we are paying for licenses and subscriptions when a school academises, despite the fact that the school itself will then have to take the financial software services. They are being charged. Are we? So there is an area that I think needs to get there. I'd like to, Carol, I can see you've got your hand up. I'll come back to you in a second. The contingency. If we haven't spent this year's £57,000 contingency, why is there any line in there next year or any column for contingency? Effectively, we've got £57,000 allocated to this year, sitting in a pot. Why would we now put another £50,000 into that?
Catherine, you can maybe pick up on the exact figures, but in terms of the de-delegated, the actual sort of maternity leave cover, etc., Paul, this year is overspent. So while the contingency itself's not, and when you look at the de-delegated overall, there's an underspend in contingency and an overspend elsewhere that are actually sort of offsetting each other.
No, that doesn't give you, with all due respect, that doesn't give you the ability to offset from the contingency to pay for another column. I think that's a little disingenuous.
So I think, yeah, I mean, not behind the scenes, Paul, but obviously that would be part of the conversation at year end in terms of what that looks like. I suppose our concern is that we are in an ever-changing world as well in terms of not knowing and to not have something further to put in, not knowing what's going to happen over the rest of this financial year as well. I think we felt that it was wise to have the option to ensure that we had contingency there, because as Catherine says, that there is no other place left in the way the formula works to be able to dip in.
Carol, I've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to raise the same point that you've just raised, Paul, about the contingencies, and I was also going to say the line there that concerns me, and I think will concern other schools, is the supply costs one, which you're saying, Lynn, is overspent. But my line there has gone up by 50% in 12 months, in 24 months. I'm paying 50% more than I was 2 years ago. And I know that we're not getting a great deal of benefit from that as a school. And I understand the sharing of the costs and everything, but I think that's maybe one of the ones that we need to look at first. And we maybe need to let other schools know that that's a priority to be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we moved some of these onto sort of number on roll basis, and I think what this has shown, and Carol, your point's really valid. We've got, as a local authority, we've got obviously no controls over those costs, and the fact that we are setting it based on what trends look like. But the fact that the current model that we have is that's charged out on number of roll, unfortunately means that it doesn't necessarily feel it. I'm sure it doesn't feel at you to an individual school that necessarily mirrors your individual experience. So I think, that I completely take on board your point. As we've said, I think we need to look at all of these, both in terms of what the cost base is, what the activity is behind the service, but also reconsidering, whether these should still be de-delegated items or not, and where we think there's still value in that, whether number on roll is still the best way to go, or whether we might want to look at something different. As I said, we obviously have to make a decision one way or the other for the upcoming financial year. Obviously, we've just not had the time and space to be able to progress those discussions in recent months, but we're more than happy to take that forward for 22-23.
Thank you, Lynn. I've got Emma and Liz. I'd then like to try and pull this round and move ourselves forward. Emma? Hi, Emma. May not have your microphone off yet.
There we go. Sorry. I appreciate that COVID has not enabled meetings to happen or perhaps pieces of work to have been done. But at the same time, we've been open since last March trying to manage our budget. And the fact that various parts are coming out when it hasn't been spent in another budget just seems unfair to the maintained schools that are covering these costs. And it will make a huge impact on all of our budgets, however many thousands are taken out for various things. Some of the things I understand, but the contingency one that you mentioned, Paul, and also the staff cost supply cover, I don't understand the amount on there for us either.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Liz, another quick comment from you, please.
Yeah, it was just regarding the supply costs. When you go for insurance to other outside companies, you do your quote based on full-time equivalent teachers numbers. So I'm just wondering why the supply couldn't be based on that rather than number and roll.
Yeah, that's a good point, Liz. Yeah, definitely would look at that going forward.
Okay, thank you. All good comments. So our challenge is that we have tabled in front of us a de-delegated budget, and we need to make some decisions based upon the figures that we've got presented in front of us. It is clear from the comments that Catherine and Lynn have been making that there is an ambition to spend time which hasn't been available to them, recognising the challenges they may have had. I appreciate everybody's had them, but there hasn't been the time to look at this in the detail that has been necessary prior to preparing the 21-22 budget, and a commitment to change it for 22-23. That's great, and that gives us a year to do that. But right now we need to make a decision around 21-22. So what I'd like to ask initially is, and just a very quick feedback from colleagues and really the maintained schools, would you like us to spend a little bit of time and dig deeper into the figures as presented with the potential to make some changes? Or are we going to accept that we are where we are and this is the table? We need to decide upon this table as presented, and perhaps by the time we get to 22, 23, we will have a different position. So I'd like to just understand where we are in that, on that spectrum. Any colleagues? Emma, you've got your hand up. Not okay. Then it may have been from previously. What I'm going to suggest is the following, and I'd like to see some feedback, please, because I don't really want to be driving this out on in a direction that I think may be appropriate and colleagues may not. I would like to suggest that the contingency column is amended by whatever balance is left in this year's contingency fund. So at the moment, rather than providing an extra £50,000 in next year, if there is £57,000 allocated this year and not spent, that column effectively disappears from the figures that we have in next year. So when asking you to vote on the delegated contingency column, I'd like that little piece of proviso in it if colleagues think that's appropriate. So step one, can I move to the primary maintained schools and ask for votes from those colleagues on, is the contingency to be a de-delegated budget item? And if it is to remain a de-delegated budget item, is it reduced in total by the balance that is left on this year's contingency fund? Is that a reasonable request? Liz, is that a comment or oh, I've got hands going up, I'm guessing. So are these colleagues approving that statement? I believe they are. So Liz, thank you for your vote. Yes. Brian, your vote. Yes. Carol, your vote. Yes. Karina, your vote. Yes. And Liz, am I missing? I think you're the only one I'm missing at the moment. Did I see your hand go up? Liz, brilliant. So thank you. If we will, Luciana, are you happy to pick that up as a vote for item 1, the contingencies?
Yes, Paul.
Lynn, you've got your hand up. Have I made a mistake?
Just to add something quickly, that Catherine will correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously we need, part of the reason we vote on de-delegated at this point is obviously because we factor that in through the APT, etc., and budget setting. So we will obviously not be in a position to wait until we get to the end of the year and confirm the absolute balance. We might need to make a call just now and maybe make an assumption that we hold. I suppose it's whether we assume that we hold a little bit back, but we would need to make a decision at this stage on what we think that contingency position at year end would be.
We've not spent any of the 57,000. You're looking for 50,000 here. I think it's reasonable to assume that between now and the 1st of April, 31st of March, you will have £50,000 at least of that 57 remaining.
That's fine. I just want to be clear. If everyone's comfortable with that, that's the assumption we can make at this point. Yeah.
Okay. Emma, a quick point before we move on to next item, before we move on to secondaries.
Yeah, my hand didn't raise for some reason, so mine was up as well.
Okay, Nick, I'm going to ask you please to vote on behalf of the secondaries for that position for contingencies. And Nick's hand's gone up. Thank you. So if I can move on from contingencies to item 2, behaviour support services. I'm asking now, please, for the primary maintained school representatives to vote for behaviour support services remaining as a de-delegated item. So if you could raise your hand, please, if you believe that is appropriate. I've got Carol, thank you. Liz, thank you. Karina, thank you. Brian, thank you. Emma, I think you're the only name I'm missing at the moment.
No, mine is on.
Okay. Okay, right, sorry, no problem. Thank you, Emma. So that again will be behaviour support services as listed as part of de-delegated. Nick, can I ask you please to vote for secondary? Thank you. Nick's hand's gone up, so Nick has approved that too. Moving on to the 3rd cost category, support to underperforming ethnic groups and bilingual learners, effectively I think it's colloquially called EAL. Can I ask again for primaries to vote? I can see Emma, thank you. Brian, thank you. Carol, thank you. Karina, thank you. Liz, thank you. And Emma, I'm guessing your hand may be up. I can't see it on my screen. No. Okay, with Emma.
Yeah, yes, it is on, but I think my computer's playing up for some reason. It's the bandwidth up here. They're all on Zoom, so apologies.
Not a problem. That's okay. Thank you. So that again is approved. Nick, could I ask you please to vote for secondaries? And Nick has also approved that support to underperforming ethnic groups and bilingual learners remains delegated. Item number 4, which is staff cost supply cover. I think we're recognising that there may be some changes needed to this particular column, but as it stands, tabled as is, can I ask if we are going to vote for it? Brian, thank you, yes. Carol, thank you, yes. Liz, thank you, yes. Karina, thank you, yes. Emma, thank you, yes. So that remains as a de-delegated item. The 5th one is licenses and subscriptions, basically a reallocation. Liz, thank you, yes. Carol, yes. Karina, yes, thank you. Brian, yes, thank you. Emma, yes, thank you. And Liz, I can't see. Yep, Liz has put her hand up as well. Thank you. Forgive me, I forgot on the staff cost to ask Nick on behalf of the secondaries. Nick, could you? Yep, thank you. You approve that. And could I ask you now, Nick, on behalf of the secondaries for licenses and subscriptions? Thank you again. Colleagues, thank you for going through that. Lynn, it is very clear that there is some input needed before we build next year's set of de-delegated figures. I would suggest that it is something, given it's maintained schools, happy for School Forum to be involved in allocating a task group, but it may be more appropriate for you and Catherine to assemble from the reps a task and finish group rather than it effectively come back through School Forum.
Yep, happy to do that, Paul, and it's absolutely, you absolutely have our commitment as a group going forward that we want to get in about this and be able to do that, and almost to allow time to consult early in the same way we did with the wider schools block budget this year, to really be able to progress that at the earliest stage. So we'll happily take that forward.
Thank you. And just
thank you to everyone for the positive vote today.
Listening to the contribution that several colleagues there made, you've got several people who you can immediately put on that group, and they will help you rethink how things are going.
Thank you. That's much appreciated.
Thank you, everybody. If we can move on to item 36, which is the schools block budget. Between Darren and as chair of the task and finish group and Catherine, if you could quickly just pick us up with what has happened since December.
Hi, yeah. Shall I start, Darren?
Yeah, if you would. Yeah, thanks, Catherine.
Thanks. Okay, so we obviously have to submit the schools budget to the SFA by the 21st of January. We consulted with schools. We sent out the indicative budgets that we sent to the December forum out for consultation with schools to respond by the 8th of January. Obviously, schools are very busy and there's never a good time to do a consultation. And surprisingly, we haven't had any responses from schools, but we're hoping that because we engaged early with schools with the process and the principles of the formula, that we're hoping that schools are happy with the formula that it is, and that's why no one felt strongly enough to comment on the consultation in December. The disapplication that we sent through for the PIGET was approved literally that afternoon of the December forum. The approval came through, so we've now incorporated that into the final budget. It's based on the October 2020 census. It's been updated with all the people characteristics now as well from October 2020. We've updated the business rates, which are just an in and out in the budgets. Whatever we give you as an allocation, is that's what you're charged. We've also increased the pupil numbers at Aldergrove because they're going to have 2 classes in reception from September 21. So when you look at the figures, it looks like they've jumped up massively from the indicative budget, but that's just because we've increased the pupil numbers in the APT. And that is it.
Yeah, that's all good. Can I thank Catherine for all the work she did? I know she was working right up to the 23rd, 24th of December on that. So thank you very much for that. And after Christmas.
Yeah. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you, Catherine, and Darren and the Task and Finish group. It has felt, despite some of the challenges everybody's had, a very smooth process to get to a point where we have a budget table for recommendation. It's great that you've got that page on the screen, Catherine. To be only £18,000 out in 122 million is a real credit to the quality of the work that was put in to develop the draft budget. Can I ask if colleagues have any questions to Catherine or Darren and the Task and Finish group around this budget? I'm looking down my list and I can't see any hands up, and everybody's microphone is off. Then again, with thanks, can I move to ask people to vote? We have to vote on this budget being put forward for the borough. So could I ask people to vote, please? If you could raise your hands on the screen. I'm looking down. Forgive me, I won't read everybody out, but I'm seeing all hands go up. Yes, is looking like an overwhelming approval. Thank you. Yes. So, Luciana, if you would note that it is unanimously approved. Thank you all very much. And again, Catherine and the Task and Darren and the Task and Finish group, great piece of work. Really good. Thank you very much. Could we move from item 36 onto item 37, which is a verbal update, Sal, on high needs block?
Of course, Chair. Just to let colleagues know that there's not a whole lot further in terms of information input to that we delivered at the extra meeting in the middle of December. Obviously, there's been a kind of a little bit of a break over Christmas in the middle, other than to say that we are continuing to deliver and develop on all of the areas that we highlighted to colleagues. I noted at the meeting of the 11th that we did provide a lot of information within that meeting, and possibly didn't give colleagues as much opportunity or time as maybe they would have liked in order to ask questions. And the offer is still there that if colleagues have any questions or queries resulting of the papers and the discussion that was held on the 11th, please do send those in. We haven't received anything as yet, so that offer is still available. Of course, the key elements in terms of our approach to the high needs block and the challenges that we face is that we're continuing to work on the SEND strategy. So that's still out for consultation in its final form, and that consultation ends at the end of this month. We are still developing and engaging with our colleagues in respect of the new special school in Winnersh in terms of the impact that will have in terms of high needs block. We're still continuing to work through a whole raft of activity in relation to home to school transport arrangements and the broader community transport engagement. Again, in terms of the impact that has, we're reviewing the resource-based provision and seeking to move forward in that area as well. So there's a whole number of areas that we're continuing to be active in terms of responding to making sure that we are able to continue to meet the needs for children in Wokingham, but still take account of the need to reduce the deficit on the higher needs block. As I said, Chair, we are more than happy to receive any questions either inside or outside of the meeting, should colleagues wish to.
Thank you, Sal. I have a number of questions that I've been gathering from colleagues since our last meetings. I offered, you recall, that if people wanted to feed them through SCORE, they could. That offer is still open. most of those questions are very data orientated rather than strategic planning orientated. But I will pull those all together once they've all come in and then get them across to you as part of your consultation. Obviously, colleagues can send their own questions indirectly to you.
Absolutely.
I've got a direct question. And I commented, I sent you an email after the meeting thanking you and your colleagues. I thought the quality and the content and just the general cohesiveness of the presentation was outstanding. Thank you very much for that. Alongside that, one of the challenges that I fear coming down the track is, as strong and as good as the consultation was, there were no figures in there at all. And assuming, and I'm confident it will, your document is recognised as being a very a likely and strong way forward for high needs block. When you cost it and it comes in at £5 million over the amount of money that we have in the budget for this coming year, what approach do you take in terms of prioritisation? Because clearly having a wonderful consultation, a wonderful strategy that everybody's going, yes, we really like this, but it's £5 million more than we can afford, doesn't moves us to a place that is not the greatest place to be.
No, I mean, in terms of the SEND strategy, clearly we are seeking to be ambitious for Wokingham, and there are elements within the strategy that will need resourcing. Of course, the prioritisation of the delivery of the strategy outcomes, which is a multi-agency strategy, it's not a local authority strategy, will need to take account of the pressures on the high needs block as well, in terms of how some of the activity in there is actually intended to be a direct relationship in terms of reducing cost, but still maintaining quality of service delivery and provision. But at the same time, we do acknowledge that we will continue to be in the space whereby the resources available to Wokingham from central government in order to respond to the needs of children with special educational needs and disabilities is that there continues to be a very significant gap. And Wokingham, like every other local authority, or pretty much every other local authority in the country, experiences that gap. So yes, we will need to make some very, very challenging decisions in terms of prioritisation, but much of the strategy is geared around how do we continue to support children effectively and appropriately with a real view to the cost implications of that support, and how do we do it in the most cost-effective way.
And I understand that the consultation paper that I read, whilst comprehensive, I didn't feel emphasised that there is likely to be a need to prioritise. And whilst you will have gathered many people's thoughts on what is the right or what is the best approach for the programme over the next several years, I think you have a major challenge when you then are going to try and fit a quart into a pint pot.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of areas within the strategy, it's certainly in terms of the action plan, that have been highlighted as key priorities within that. But you're absolutely right. There is a raft of other things that as a partnership we've identified are key activities that we think should move Wokingham forward. Again, the consultations continues to be open through to the end of January, and I would encourage everybody, if they do have queries either around the strategy as the document, or as you highlight, Paul, how we're going to deal with the management of it and the implementation of it, please do feed that in before the end of the consultation process.
Thank you. Colleagues, other comments to Sal? Looking down, no open microphones and no hands. I've got what I'm conscious that I really want to ensure we finish don't lose time. I'd like to table the concept that EHCPs is an area that has been frustrating in terms of the ability to move EHCPs seamlessly through the process between schools and the SEN team, and have them have the number and the speed with which they are addressed appropriately coped with. I would like to consider, or I'd like you to consider, if colleagues think it appropriate, the £600,000 that has been wired from the schools block into the high needs block. I would potentially like you to consider, as you pull the budget together, allocating, if not all, a very significant proportion of that amount of money directly to EHCPs and the activity around EHCPs to enhance the way in which they are coped with at school and SEN level, so that we don't have some of the problems that we may have had over the last couple of years with addressing them as fast as we can. So by applying more funding to that very specific area, and especially seeing as that funding, in quotes, has come from the schools block, schools, I hope, would see a very tangible change in the activity and the service that they receive.
Absolutely. I mean, we're considering all of the areas in terms of that delegated amount or delegated amount back into the high needs block, and EHCP delivery is part of that, as are other linked elements, so home to school transport for children with special educational needs and disabilities, as well as, and how do we link those two things together? Because actually the EHCP only works if you can get to school as well. So we are looking at across the board how we might look to apply that additional amount that's come into high needs block as a result of the decision that was taken by Schools Forum.
Then I would like to just would welcome colleagues thinking, when you bring the budget, the high needs block budget, to the meeting in March, and when we look at it, review it, and ultimately approve it, I would very much like to see accompanying that budget a clear explanation where the 600,000 has been allocated, so that we can see a change in activity, rather than, for want of a better description, it just going into the £6 million loss that we've got and just propping that up by an extra £500,000.
Of course, we can do that. I think the only thing that I would also advise is that we also need to be mindful that we do have a significant overspend in the high needs block that does need managing, and whilst we are seeing more money going into that as a result of the decision, where we do want that to go direct on service delivery, that means that it will not have an impact on the overall deficit within the high needs block, and that just needs to be held in the memory of Forum as we go forward, because it can't both fund continued and enhanced delivery as well as have an impact on deficit. I think some of the other things in the strategy will start to have an impact on deficit, but we just need to be minded to that as well.
Good. I think we're on a similar page, i.e. the increased funding goes to increased or changed activity, and we will be able to identify that compared to this year's activity levels. That sounds good. Thank you. Colleagues, any other comments? If not, thank you, Sal. I think you're up again. I think on item 38 on the agenda, school admissions task and finished group. Sounds like we almost touched on that earlier.
We did. As I said, unfortunately, there's nothing further to report because the first meeting isn't until Tuesday of next week. Of course, I'll provide an input on that when we next meet. The primary focus for that initial meeting is to finalise the terms of reference, and also to set the key priorities for that group going forward, so that we can start to define what the activity is coming out of that task and finish group.
Thank you. If there are no further questions on the task and finish group for admissions. Again, looking down my list, I can't see hands up or microphones off. Thank you, Sal. If I can move on to item 39, our forward programme. On the forward programme, we very specifically have the early years budget. And I've got Ian on the call. I can see Ian's on the call. I don't think Kerry's with us today. But Lynn, Catherine, Ian, you're the task and finish group. I'm hoping that you will be coming to us at that meeting with your joint understanding of where the budget for 22-23 will go, 21-22 will go.
Yeah, that's certainly the intention, Paul. Obviously, the sort of developing situation with how the DfE are setting up data collection this term is sort of throwing a little bit of a spanner in the works of timeline, but absolutely we will reconvene the task and finish group and work through that in advance of any recommendations coming back to Skills Forum.
Thank you, lovely. Ian, yeah, you okay with that?
Yeah, any idea on timescales, Lynn?
Yeah, we're obviously, there's discussions going on literally with the DfE today, and I know Catherine was going to catch up with Stuart later, so we'll be in touch, Ian, over the next couple of days. That was our intention anyway, just to try and pencil in how we best do what we can given the wider national picture. But we'll certainly be in touch by the end of this week to bottom some of that out.
Excellent, ready whenever you are.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you both. And if we can add to the forward plan for the next meeting, Sal's update on the admissions task and finish group, or however Sal and the task and finish group want to bring their early thinking back to School Forum, that would be very helpful. Are there any other comments on the forward plan? Again, I can't see hands up and no microphones open. I'm going to move then on to any other business, and I'll do that as I try and do most times. I'll just run down my list of participants on my screen, ask you if you could then come off the microphone and say yes or no. But Ben, anything from you on AOB? Okay, Brian, anything from you?
No.
Sorry.
No.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you, Brian.
Sorry.
Karina?
Not from me.
Thank you. Darren?
Not from me, Chair. Thank you.
Emma?
Not from me.
Carol?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Ginny?
No, thank you.
Ian Thomas, who for colleagues who joined the meeting slightly after us, Ian has been sitting in for Jay, who I gather is not particularly well at the moment. So thank you for sitting in, Ian.
Thank you very much. No, nothing from me, but thank you very much.
Ian Morgan?
Nothing from me, Paul, thanks.
Catherine?
No, thank you.
Liz?
No.
Luciana, are we okay? Have we done all the things that we needed to do?
Yes, thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Lynn.
No, nothing from me, thank you.
I've got somebody called MES space HT.
Yeah.
Wonderful to...
Sorry, I don't want to change. I'm not the team.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you.
I couldn't hear. Could I ascertain who that was?
Yeah, it's Paul Gibson.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I don't know how to change my name on Teams. I'm rubbish.
Fine. Ali?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Sean?
No, all good, thanks.
Good. Nick?
Nothing from me, thanks, Paul.
Piers, it's been good to see. We were so impressed by your report early on. We rushed through it and haven't needed to call you back. But thank you for joining. Anything you'd like to raise?
No, thank you.
Okay. Raj?
Hello, everyone. This is Raj from Foundry College. I'm the new Business and Finance Manager. I'm taking over from Donna. So I'm just sitting here to understand what we are discussing today. So I'm good, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Sal, anything more you'd like to raise?
No, just my ongoing thanks to all schools for everything you're doing at the moment.
Indeed. Shirley?
No, nothing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, hopefully I've not missed anybody out. If I have, shout now. If not, then forgive me for running a couple of minutes over. But thank you all for attending, and look forward to speaking to you all again. I think it's in mid-March. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.